Hello everyone, I am back with another video, and today's video is going to be a bit of a part 2 to something I was actually recently featured on here on YouTube. So a big shout out to Emily, or Orbalology, here on YouTube. She's an excellent channel. She's been creating videos for about a little over a year now, and I'd really recommend folks check out her channel. I'll leave a link below. But the video I was featured in was talking about favorite childhood games that still hold up today. And when she asked me to be on, I just had a sea of ideas for that particular video. I won't tell you what's featured in that video and what I selected because I want to leave it as a surprise if you haven't seen that yet. But there were a number of other ideas that I had for that particular idea or topic. So maybe we'll do more retrospective lookbacks here in the future. But for today's purposes, if you can believe it, Banjo-Kazooie recently celebrated its 25th anniversary. And as I continue to get older, I still feel like Banjo-Kazooie ages like a fine wine. So what do you say we take a look back at some of my first experiences playing Banjo-Kazooie and how I feel about the game, having recently beat it actually earlier this year. Let's take a look.
I tend to have vivid memories of specific games or experiences of my childhood. Banjo-Kazooie is a bit foggier. Like many of the games growing up, I often discovered some of the best at my friend Scott's house, since he had two older brothers and they always seemed to get the latest and greatest when it came to consoles and games, way before me and certainly way before any of my other friends. I remember playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, Bomberman 64, Perfect Dark for the first time at their house, and it's also where I first saw Final Fantasy VII on the PS1, and my personal favorite game of all time, Kingdom Hearts, being played on the PS2 in their basement for the first time as well. So it's probably safe to assume that this is where I was also first introduced to Banjo-Kazooie, because I did eventually have a copy of my own, so I'm sure I went home, bugged my parents, and asked them to eventually get me a copy for either Christmas or some birthday of mine. Now as a kid, it's important to know that Tiny Rusty wasn't very good at games. Whether it was puzzles, difficult boss battles, or just finding out where to go next in these games, I struggled so much and often needed my buddy Scott to help me out. But fortunately, those challenges never really kept me from enjoying Banjo-Kazooie as a kid. One of the reasons why I always favored Banjo-Kazooie over Mario 64 as a kid was because you could explore each level to your heart's content, and it wouldn't spit you back out after each Jiggy you collected, and I think that added to the sense of adventure and immersion, where Mario 64 often broke that up when you were targeting a singular star, instead of a larger pool of collectibles like you were in Banjo. But this is not unlike my love for the Spyro trilogy growing up on PlayStation 1. I always explored every inch of the level, ensuring I secured all 100 notes, 10 Jiggies, and 5 Jinjos before moving on to the next level. And it was with rare exception during those later levels where the precise platforming can be a bit more tedious. Collecting everything in each level never felt like a burden or a chore to me. It was almost essential, and it was probably instrumental in instilling a bit of a completionist mindset for me when playing 3D platformers, even deep into my adult life. And maybe even a bit of the PlayStation trophy collecting mindset as well. But collecting aside, I have to highlight the level design in Banjo-Kazooie. I mean, can we just talk about the variety that's present in this game? From Treasure Trove Cove, Bubble Gloop Swamp, the classic Freezeezy Peak, Click Clock Wood, and so many others. The satisfaction of collecting enough Jiggies to unlock the next world, and then physically going to a giant Jiggy platform to piece together the level's picture to unlock it, felt and still does feel so rewarding for all that time you spent running around the level collecting everything there was to find. Each level felt unique not only in its design, but the types of challenges that awaited you there to earn each of those 10 Jiggies. Not to mention the goofy characters you'd interact with along the way, and the brilliantly weird dialogue as well. could even transform Banjo into several different creatures thanks to our good pal Mumbo, and this would then allow you to reach areas you previously couldn't, playing as just Banjo and Kazooie. Now I'm sure several of you that clicked on this video were waiting for me to talk about this, and there's no way you can talk about Banjo-Kazooie without also mentioning the music. And oh my goodness, Grant Kirkhope is a legend for this game's soundtrack, and as hyperbolic as it might sound, his scores of games like GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, DK64, and of course Banjo-Kazooie are about as cemented in my brain as John Williams' scores of Star Wars, because I played these games about as often as I watched those films as a kid. I mean, this man went so hard on these rare games back then, and I think Banjo-Kazooie is still some of his best work. I particularly love Treasure Trove Cove right here. Not to mention how themes change depending when you're on land versus when you're underwater. I thought that was so cool as a kid, and it's even something I'll test in other games nowadays, just to see if it's implemented there as well. Now, while we haven't gotten a proper remake of Banjo-Kazooie, it has been nice to be able to revisit the game as part of the Rare Replay collection. And returning to the subject of me not being good at games as a kid, I for the longest time had never beaten enrolled credits on Banjo-Kazooie. It wasn't until earlier this year that I finally beat the game, and it was such a treat to pick up a more recent Xbox save file from a few years back, collecting the remaining jiggies and notes in Click Clock Wood, and finishing that wild trivia game in Grunty's Furnace fun. Candidly, I found very little about that board game trivia challenge fun, but if that's my biggest gripe with the game, I think we're pretty okay. As a kid, I only remember making it as far as Gobi's Valley or maybe Freezeezy Peak. I know, the shame is real. It wasn't until earlier this year as a 30-year-old man that I finally beat this game. But it's worth noting because I know those earlier levels like the back of my hand and where each of the collectibles are, so it was a ton of fun to experience some of those later levels for the first time, like Mad Monster Mansion and Click Clock Wood. Click Clock Wood especially was so impressive from a design standpoint and how you would complete tasks in each of the 4 seasons that would then have an impact to the level's design in the following season. It was just so ahead of its time, even if some of the more precise platforming can be a bit challenging at times. I think it's fair to say that Mario 64 laid the foundation and walked for the 3D platforming genre so that so many other series and games that came after it could run. Banjo-Kazooie soared above so many 3D platformers during that era, and after finishing it earlier this year, I still think it stands tall as one of the best in the genre. It's a real shame we haven't seen a new Banjo game since Nuts and Bolts in 2008, but I'm still holding out hope that Banjo will make his grand return in the next few years. But until then, I'll continue to replay this treasured classic.